The next section is the Title I Part A Distributions section. The first screen that should appear, only if you have participating private schools, is the Title I Part A Equitable Services to Private Schools screen. First, if you will be claiming indirect costs for serving the private school and have negotiated these costs with them during consultation, you can enter that amount on the box in the first table and save. Upon saving, your private schools will have allocations appear in the second table. You can enter negotiated direct administrative costs if those were agreed upon during consultation. If you have at least $500,000 in Title I Part A and new fund transfers to Title I Part A, a required parent and family engagement amount will appear for each private school. That amount, plus the total instruction and professional development amount, will equal to the total availability in the far right column. If you cannot see these columns, you will need to either zoom out or scroll to the right. You might want to either print the screen, write down these amounts, or take a screenshot to use later in the application process. Be sure to save before moving on to the next screen. Moving down the left sidebar, we will now work on the Title I Part A Public School Reservations and Carryover Distribution screen. The table at the top of the screen shows all funds that are available to support the Title I Part A basic program in the LEA. The first section to complete is only for districts with a total new allocation plus transfers for Title I that is at least $500,000. If this is the case, you will see a 1% minimum amount for parent and family engagement. This amount will need to be allocated to individual schools on the next screen. On the second row, you can enter an additional parent and family engagement reservation. Keep in mind that this must be done in consultation with family stakeholders. The total parent and family engagement reservation for the new allocation will appear, plus the maximum reservation that can be kept at the district level. Please remember that this section is only to be completed if the new allocation plus transfers is $500,000 or greater. Districts with less than $500,000 can and should use Title I Part A funds for family engagement activities, but those amounts are not recorded in this section. The next section is new homeless and optional district reservations. The first line should include any district level reservations for serving homeless students. This must include academic supports students experiencing homelessness will receive in non-Title I buildings, but can also include additional amounts set aside for personal welfare and academic supplies, a homeless liaison, and homeless transportation. Additionally, funds can be reserved to serve students in foster care. If a district also receives an allocation to serve Title I Part A neglected facilities, an amount will appear up at the top in the first table. If the desire is to reserve additional Title I Part A funds on top of this, those funds can be entered on this row. If a district desires to reserve funds for indirect costs for Title I Part A, plus any new funds being transferred from Title II or IV to Title I, those would be entered on these three rows. If there will be any direct administrative costs, such as a Title I director, training for Title I administrative staff, or audit costs for the Title I Part A program, those administrative costs would be entered on this row. The last row of the new funds section is for any new funds that will be used for additional costs or optional district level reservations. For additional guidance on allowable uses of funds in this section, please refer to the help document. In this example, we're going to reserve $50,000 for our students experiencing homelessness. We are also going to take our maximum indirect amount allowed on Title I and on our transfer from Title IV. We will also put in an additional $5,000 for direct administrative costs for audit costs, plus $25,000 for a Title I director, for a total of $30,000. The next section on this screen is for carryover. If there are carryover funds to be used for parent-family engagement, homeless, and optional district reservations, those amounts would be entered in these sections. If there are carryover funds to be distributed to specific schools, those amounts would need to be entered in this table as well. Generally, carryover funds are distributed to Title I schools through the per pupil formula, which appears on this row. If a district is choosing to revert carryover back to a school of origin's budget, the assurance box must be checked at the bottom. Finally, at the bottom, a summary of available funds, required and other optional district reservations can be seen. Similar to the previous screen, you may want to take screenshots, record this information, or print this screen for later use. Don't forget to save before moving on to the next screen. So in our example, we will also take administrative costs and indirect from our carryover, but that is all we will do. What we are choosing to do is take the remaining carryover to be redistributed to Title I schools in accordance with the per pupil formula. The next screen you will need to complete is the allocation to school attendance areas screen. At the top, you will see a minimum amount required to be budgeted per low-income pupil. This is the minimum amount that will need to be budgeted for each school. The list of schools and associated data is pre-populated from the data on schools in the district and ranking methodology screens. The amount per pupil will automatically pre-populate, but LEAs are able to adjust the per pupil amounts to meet the needs of their buildings. If a district has fewer than 1,000 students, the schools will be listed in poverty rank order, regardless of the grade span of each school. Otherwise, the ranking methodology selection will dictate the order the schools are displayed. LEAs are required to distribute funds to schools based on low-income student count for each building. Determine the amount per low-income student for the highest ranked building first. Then, an equal amount or less will need to be used for each remaining school until all schools are served. If a school is going to be skipped or there aren't enough Title I Part A funds to meet minimum per pupil amount or rank and serve requirements, then Section 31A amount per pupil column will be used. Ensure that the remaining balance is as close to zero as possible. If there are caregiver or family engagement reservations for each school, those amounts will need to be added to the carryover and parent and family engagement reservation column. The amounts for each school will be determined by the LEA, and the remaining balance will need to be zero. Finally, when you are finished, you'll want to check the assurance box at the bottom of the screen and save. In this example, we chose to skip the first school. We're going to allocate $750 of Section 31A funds per low-income pupil to meet the needs of the students at Cadillac Innovation High School. The next building, Lincoln Elementary School, is also above 75% and must be served. We must have no greater than $750, but we can also do $750. Because we have a remaining balance that is in the negative, we'll need to start reducing. Oftentimes in these sections, you just need to play with the calculations to determine exactly how much per pupil amount should be. So in this case, I like to use the calculator to determine what the remaining amount should be. So since I have a balance of 2,853, I will divide that by the number of low-income students at that school. And I will see that I need to add $5 and we'll round up to 65 cents and see what happens. $5.65. So my total will be $495.65. That gets us to 0. As you'll see, the highest poverty building has the highest amount. The buildings below can have that amount, but cannot be any higher. So we'll be okay there. Now, we have $7,718 to allocate to our schools for family engagement. We're going to choose to use that money at the 2 elementary schools. So we're going to say 37, we'll go 3,000 at the first school and 47.18 at the second school because there's more students. We now have $0 remaining there. We have checked the box and we can save. You will also want to either record this information or print this screen or take a screenshot for later use in the application. The final screen in this section is school level budgets. On this screen, the LEA will indicate which building or buildings will be funded with Title II Part A or Title IV Part A funds if it was indicated earlier that those funding streams would be transferred to Title I. Ensure the allocated amounts in the Title II and IV column match the available fund amounts by entering the available amounts to the buildings that will be served with those funds. As long as the remaining balances are all 0, you may save and move on. As with the other screens in this section, you will want to take screenshots, record the information, or print the screen for future use. So we are over budget by $34,620. We said we were going to transfer $25,000 of Title II to Title I and $10,000 of Title IV to Title I, but we already took indirect costs out of those, so that's why it's less. So we are going to do the school with the biggest budget right now, which would be Lincoln. And just for ease, we're going to put both transfer school budgets for Lincoln, not to make things more complicated. So we are down to $0 remaining balance. We can save, and we should be all set.